By the way, this is my parents' congregation. Whenever the building's not in use, I get it all to myself. A lot of people ask me if I'm a filmmaker, why I studied religion in college instead of filmmaking. I'm gonna try and explain a little bit of that to you today, and also some of my own thoughts on what makes for a good story. If there's anything that you should walk away with, or if you forget everything else, there's just one single takeaway that I think is the most important, which is essence and form. What is essence? And what is form? So let's say you're a painter and you want to communicate the essence of simplicity. You might make a painting like this. Very simple geometric shapes to represent a sunset. Or if you want to take simplicity to the max, maybe you do what this artist did and you just have 3 blank canvases that are completely white. That is really simple. You can't get more simple than that. Or let's say you're a painter and you want to communicate the essence of chaos. Maybe you might make a painting like this, of a guy's head exploding with a bunch of objects. Or maybe you go back into history and you depict an epic war, fires, and people dying in a huge storm. Essence is an idea, a feeling, or a thought, and it's invisible. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it. Form is how that idea, feeling, or thought is expressed. It's visible, you can actually see it, it's tangible, it's visceral. So keep this in mind. So let's talk about stories. Why are stories important? In college, I majored in religion. Why is that? Part of the reason is because religion contains some of the best stories of all time. You got the Bhagavad Gita, for example. Krishna is talking with Arjuna before this great battle where he's about to go in and fight against some of his own family members. He's really confused and he's trying to figure out, how do I go into this battle equipped with the right knowledge, wage the battle of life to the best of your ability. Or in Christianity, you got the story of Adam and Eve, who were created in God's image. But then one day Eve was curious about this tree of knowledge and this snake that was like, hey, just take a bite from this apple and I'll show you all the knowledge of the world. And then Adam follows suit and they start to have separation with God. Or in Buddhism, you got Gautama Buddha, who was born a rich prince to a very wealthy family until one day, outside the palaces, he started to see people with diseases, people dying, old people. Not everything lives forever, What is the purpose of life? Like, what's happening here? And he goes out on this epic journey to find enlightenment and the ultimate truth of life. So these stories have lasted thousands of years. Why is that? These stories capture an element of truth. And they don't just capture an element of truth, they capture it in a very compelling way that is much more effective than ways of communicating that are not stories. In other words, communicating with a story is so much more effective than communicating with no story. Let me give you an example of communicating without a story. There is nothing that is good or bad. That's just kind of a plain truth, or like a nugget of wisdom just plop down in front of you, right? Let me show you an example of communicating with a story. A farmer and his son had a beloved horse who helped the family earn a living. One day the horse ran away, and the neighbors exclaimed, "Your horse ran away! What terrible luck!" The farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." A few days later, the horse returned home, leading a few wild horses back to the farm as well. The neighbors shouted, "Your horse has returned," and brought several horses home with him. "What great luck!" The farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." Later that week, the farmer's son was trying to break one of the horses, and she threw him to the ground, breaking his leg. The neighbors cried, "Your son broke his leg! What terrible luck!" The farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." A few weeks later, soldiers from the National Army marched through town, recruiting all boys from the army. They did not take the farmer's son because he had a broken leg. The neighbors shouted, "Your boy is spared! What tremendous luck!" To which the farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see." So, is it more effective to communicate with or without a story? Stories are a way to help people understand better, to understand deeper, more fully, and viscerally. This is communicating without a story, when you just communicate something directly. This is an example of communicating with a great story. where you bring them through such an effective journey and they've completely stepped into the shoes of your mind-body experience in time and space through the exact things you've gone through so that they completely understand and get it. In other words, stories are a medium for empathy as well. So let's revisit why I was so interested in religion and stories. Because religions have some of the greatest stories of all time that are timeless and have been around for thousands of years and have inspired tons of other stories. And the way I see it is that on one hand, on the left here, you have humans, you and I, regular people. And on the right, you have truth, God, ultimate reality, whatever name you want to call it, doesn't really matter. And so it seems like there's some important insight or some truth that these people who wrote these sacred texts are trying to tell us through the form of story, because stories are the most effective way to try to get us to understand what the truth is, what life is, what we're doing here, what our purpose is, what it means to love, to suffer, and the meaning behind it all. That's also why I joined Jubilee back in 2017. Our purpose was to tell the stories of all these different types of people, and our mission was to spread radical empathy globally. Now, there's a whole different journey to my Jubilee experience that I can share in another video, but we weren't just telling people to empathize. We were bringing them together and creating formats and spaces and conversations that were entertaining, bringing people on a journey so that we could slip in this empathy, almost like putting broccoli on pizza. Or another phrase we used to use was Trojan horsing people. You know, you're giving them entertainment, but within that are seeds of profound connection and understanding each other. That's what I was trying to do when I was at Jubilee. So, a quick recap. Stories are the most effective way of communicating. Stories communicate a certain truth, essence. Remember we talked about essence? A true artist/storyteller will settle for nothing less than perfection. And why is that? Because they're trying to express the essence of something, a truth, a perspective, to get you to see, to think, to feel, to experience, to understand viscerally in your bones. To capture the true essence of something is the job of an artist, right? So the question is, how does one craft truly great stories so you can get across what it is you're trying to communicate? If we take the analogy of cooking some steak, how do we go from this, just the raw meat, just the information, to this, to make it juicy and delicious and aesthetically pleasing and smell good and be something that's truly compelling? Know what dish you're cooking. You'd actually be really surprised. A lot of people are crafting stories without knowing the essence of what they're trying to get across. They're playing at the level of form with all these ideas. They don't really know what it is they're trying to say. Don't play around on the level of form of, the colors and the cameras and all that stuff. All that comes later. Essence and form. Start with essence. You must have a clear, deep understanding of the essence in order to create the most effective form. In other words, a good story takes an essence of an idea, and then it takes the form to the max that it can go to serve that idea. So it's going from this to this to this. How do you take the form to the absolute crystal clear max sharpness and effectiveness to get across the essence as effectively as possible? I'm not saying that good stories are always the most extreme in their form like this. I'm just trying to get across the point that when you're telling a story that is effective, you're basically thinking about how to have the best form that channels the essence as clearly as possible. So there are no rules, but here are some insights I've observed about taking form to the absolute max. By the way, these insights I'm about to dive into, they're all available in a much deeper dive in an audio masterclass that I made for free. It's called How to Craft Mind-Blowing Stories, completely free in the description box below, so check it out. Anyways, some ideas of how to maximize the form. So number one, you want to maximize the conflict, the stakes, what's at risk. Number two, you want to frame things as dramatically as you can. For example, I saw this Van Gogh painting of a field of wheat and some birds, and it was just kind of a boring painting. But then afterwards, I found out that this was one of the last paintings Van Gogh painted before he died. So suddenly that piece of information, it made me perceive the painting in a whole new light. The content itself doesn't have to change, but how you present it in what context suddenly makes it that much juicier, right? Number three, avoid a boring, even-keeled ride at all costs. You want to go up and then down, and then you want to be da 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 da, and then you want to calm down again and have a different tone. So you want to bring people through different moods and tones in your story. Number 4, cut all fat possible. Keep it lean. Number 5, make us care by showing insecurities, vulnerabilities, suffering, and challenges of the characters. The most boring characters are the ones that are perfect all the time. Those are not interesting at all. Number 6, don't tell. Show. Instead of a character telling you that they're strong, have a scene where they're like slaying a lion or something like that. That's much more interesting and visceral, right? Number 7, create or cast the most dynamic characters and combinations of characters that would have great interactions. You want characters that have a really strong belief system, firm values, and that way they clash together and have very interesting interactions as well, right? All of this can be summed up in this way. Make me care. That's all there is to it. It doesn't matter how you do it, but as long as you're getting to the core of making the audience care. Some final thoughts. Feed your imagination. Travel, have great conversations, experience new things. If you're not a well of experiences and depth within yourself, there's no way that you're gonna create that kind of story and that kind of art. So you want to embody that kind of imagination by experiencing life in the universe and then channeling that into your creations. There's a book by Rick Rubin. It's called The Creative Act. The very first page starts like this. The object isn't to make art. It's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. This guy gets it. He gets that art is about feeling something viscerally, the essence of life. And because you feel it so hardcore, you can't help but try to get it out there and communicate it to other people. Related to that, I want to show you this clip from Tarantino.
You do get a sense. There's like an aesthetic working in Melville's work that you get a sense that you don't have to know how to make a movie. If you truly love cinema with all your heart and with enough passion, you can't help but make a good movie. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to know a lens, a 40 and a 50 and a fuck all that shit. Crossing the line, none of that shit's important. If you just truly love cinema with enough passion and you really love it, then you can't help but make a good movie.
So the goal is to feel it, not to think about it, analyze it, talk about it, observe it, but to be embodied and in it. And in that way, there's no choice you have but to try to express what it is that you have experienced, the essence of life itself. And that's why all these art pieces are so, it's like, they're reaching for something, you know what I mean? And that's the job of the artist, to like just get it out there, to try to express. So each of us is a unique creation of the universe, God, consciousness, source, whatever word you want to call it. You're a unique creation, and there will never be anybody else like you with your DNA and your life perspective and your experiences. And so remember that one key takeaway: essence and form. The goal is to feel the essence of life from your unique singular perspective that can never be replicated, and there will never be anyone else with your perspective, and to craft that into the greatest form to share that with other people. That's how you go from this, where you have you on one side and other humans on the other. But when you create art and great stories and you communicate what is within you, then you can get to this. A world with much deeper shared understanding, connection, empathy, and oneness, where we are coming together with universes of consciousness colliding so that we can feel, embody, and understand each other's unique experiences. Maybe you're a 14-year-old boy in Pakistan, but you tell a really honest story, and I'm a 99-year-old grandma in Kansas. Even though those two people are so different from each other, if the 14-year-old boy truly makes a heartfelt story from his heart, that 99-year-old grandma will be touched. And I don't know how that works, but it does. In the same way, if you take your experiences and you tell something from your heart, the essence of your own perspective and the life experience you have, and you share that with me authentically, expressing the essence of who you are, it allows me to dive into the essence of who I am, because underneath all the differences and the diverse perspectives is a unified consciousness we all share that transcends all of our differences. It's very hard to try to understand with rationality, but it just is what it is. That's the power of story. It brings us together. Those are some of my thoughts about the importance of studying religion with some of the greatest stories. You know, these people that are trying to hand us wisdom from thousands of years ago, the essence of life and truth, and the importance of, I think, doubling down on your own experience and authenticity and crafting your own stories. Again, the storytelling masterclass is in the description box below. It's completely free. Would encourage you to comment, like, subscribe, reach out. I'd love to connect with fellow seekers and storytellers and artists. And otherwise, wishing you a good day.